Well, welcome everybody. Welcome back to the CIB Presidential Seminar Series that we broadcast from Purdue University. And as you all are aware, we are doing panel discussions this season leading up to the CIB World Building Congress, where we are going to explore what is the role of the built environment in supporting the Sustainable Development Goals. And in that line of thought, today we have put together an excellent panel of distinguished colleagues talking about legal considerations for implementing SDGs in the built environment. So as we explore that topic, let me introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Professor Andrew Agapio. He comes to us from University of Strathclyde in UK. He's also the commission lead for W113, which is Law and Dispute Resolution. Dr. Agapio is an associate professor in construction law and the academic lead of construction procurement and law research cluster in the Department of Architecture at University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, UK. He has been a construction law management researcher for over 25 years and has held over £1 million worth of research and knowledge exchange awards within the construction law management field from the Engineering and Physical Science Research Council of UK, the Economic and Social Research Council of UK, the UK government, the Scottish government, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, and the private sector organizations. Andrew has well-honed social science research skills and works on the interface between law, technology, and the constructed environment with over 100 plus high-impact publications, including recently funded research on integrating AI technologies to support remote building inspection process. Andrew is the coordinator of the CIB Law and Dispute Resolution Working Commission, as I mentioned earlier, W113, in addition to being an innovation champion for the Built Environment Smarter Transformation, which was formerly known as the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre. Our second panelist, Professor Steve Rawlinson, he might join us a little bit later, comes to us from Hong Kong University. Steve has been at Hong Kong University for over 35 years and has been joint coordinator of CIB W92, which is procurement systems, for much of that time. His fields of expertise are procurement systems, occupational health, safety, and well-being, digital construction, and business management. He has graduated over 50 PhD students during his time at Hong Kong University, many of whom have gone on to become professors themselves, and has published a dozen books and over 100 journal papers. He is also a founding member of ARCOM, which is the Association of Researchers in Construction Management, and is a chartered civil engineer and a fellow of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Our third panelist today is Professor Giovanni Migliaccio. He comes to us from University of Washington in the US, and he's the coordinator for W122, which is Public-Private Partnerships. Professor Migliaccio is chair of the Department of Construction Management at the University of Washington, where he holds the Howard S. Wright Endowed Professorship and formerly served as the executive director of the Center for Education and Research in Construction. He earned his master's and PhD in civil engineering from University of Texas in Austin, and a master's degree in architectural engineering from Politecnico de Bari in Italy. He also co-coordinates the CIB Working Commission, as I mentioned, which is on public-private partnerships. Before relocating to the US, he managed telecommunication construction projects in Italy, which relied on complex procurement systems and contractual networks. At UW, he is actively involved in teaching, research, and service. His research focuses on innovative project delivery methods, workforce sustainability, construction economics, project management, and the education in construction engineering. His work combines qualitative and quantitative approaches and has attracted over $3 million in funding from federal, state, and international organizations, including the Transportation Research Board, the UN Industrial Development Organization, OSHA, and the Washington DOT. Professor Migliaccio has authored 6 books, 10 book chapters, and over 35 journal articles, and more than 50 conference papers. So please welcome our distinguished panelists, and let me hand it over to Professor Agapio to get the discussion started. Andrew, floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. So please bear with me. I'm just going to share some slides. So hopefully this will work. So hopefully everyone can see the slides. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening to those joining us from around the world. I'm delighted to be here and to be talking about such a really interesting topic, and to be representing the W113 CIB Working Commission in this panel discussion. Today, I'd like to speak briefly on a crucial question, which I have on this first slide. How can legal frameworks support the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals, specifically within the global construction industry? Why does this matter? The SDGs, 17 of them, have been adopted by all UN member states. The aim is to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity by 2030. That's less than 5 years away. Few industries intersect with as many of these goals as construction does. From urban infrastructure and green building to decent work and climate resistance, construction is both a contributor to and a potential solution for global sustainability challenges. But realizing this potential requires more than good intentions. It requires law. Legal frameworks, these are laws, regulations, codes, and enforcement mechanisms, and they create the foundation for sustainable construction practices. They define standards, incentives, and penalties that guide industry behavior. In essence, they transform what should be done as Sustainable Development Goals into what must be done. Now, let's look at three major ways legal frameworks can support SDGs through construction. And I'll take them one at a time. Firstly, sustainable infrastructure, which relates to SDGs 9, 11, and 13. Infrastructure is central to SDG 9, which is connected to industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And SDG 11, that is sustainable cities, yet construction is a leading emitter of CO2. So CO2 emissions are high because of the industry, and a major consumer of natural resources. So green building codes such as LEED or BREEAM-inspired national laws mandate energy efficiency, low carbon materials, and renewable integration. Zoning and urban planning regulations can reduce urban sprawl, promote mixed-use development, and improve climate resilience. And this is a key for SDG 13 on climate action. But codes alone aren't enough. Enforcement and compliance are where legal frameworks make the difference. Second area, or impact area, I want to go over is labour standards and human rights, which covers under SDG 8 and SDG 10. The construction sector often grapples with unsafe working conditions, migrant labour exploitation, and informal employment. Legal protections for fair wages, occupational safety, and non-discrimination directly support SDG 8 on decent work and SDG 10 on reduced inequalities. International labour conventions, such as those from the International Labour Office, or ILO, are essential, but they need to be transposed international law and enforced on construction sites, not just on paper. And the third area I'd like to mention is environment and resources. Construction contributes massively to waste, water pollution, and land degradation. Environmental regulations can require environmental impact assessments for projects. Laws can set limits on construction waste, mandate recycling, or incentivize the use of sustainable materials. These actions support SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, SDG 6 on clean water, and SDG 15 on life on land. Countries have made a number of strides over the years, and I'm just going to list 3 examples. Germany's Building Energy Act enforces strict energy efficiency in new building projects. Singapore's Green Mark scheme is backed by regulation and incentives, and the African Union's model law on infrastructure development provides a regional approach to sustainable project planning. The key: laws must be contextual, must be inclusive, and adapted to evolving sustainability standards. Legal frameworks are not just tools, they're levers for change. To achieve SDGs in construction, we need laws that are clear in standards, strong in enforcement, and aligned with global sustainability goals. As international professionals, whether you're an engineer, an architect, policymaker, or contractor, your voice matters in shaping and upholding these frameworks. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions as they arise in due course. So that's me, Mark. And
thank you, Professor Agapio, for setting the stage. I think that gives a clear idea of where legal implications need to be considered and how built environment can contribute towards the SDGs. Let me bring in Professor Migliaccio to present his point of view, and then we'll open the floor for Q&A. Giovanni?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not going to have a slide deck, but Andrew has really set the tone for the rest of the panel. As a co-coordinator for W122, but also as a researcher in the contracting and procurement area, I can concur with what Andrew said before about how relevant what's the breadth of the impact of the built environment and construction, more specifically, in terms of alignment with the Sustainable Development Goal by the United Nations. When we discuss about the legal implication, more specifically, the contractual framework, which affect both the public-private partnership or more broadly the procurement system, certainly there are multiple ways that the work is being done in this area, from researcher, but as well at the country level, at the jurisdictional level, may have a strong impact on the outcome and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal. Now, when we talk about outcome, I'm not saying that necessarily is a positive outcome, because those contractual framework sometimes may serve as a barrier to the achievement as well. So the importance of the way the contractual framework on built environment projects are set up so that all the contractual party can achieve the project goal at the local level, but more at the global level can achieve the Sustainable Development Goal, is very important on being able to promote a sustainable built environment. So again, this is just an introduction. I saw that we have a lot of questions already. We'll delve into these, and so I will would like to leave the time to answer questions that are specifically asked. I don't know.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Migliaccio. That gives us a great amount of time to ask some really good questions. So, and we do have indeed a lot of questions that have come in the pre-assessment. So let me start with some of the questions that have already come in, and let me start with Oluwaseun. Olu, are you with us today?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, good morning. Thank you very much for the awesome presentation. Professor Andrew was able to really touch down on a lot of things and how important legal considerations for implementing the SDGs are quite important. Like he really broke it down, and having to solve just one of this really touches every other one. Solving one touches about 6 or 7 of them, and that is quite something to really hit on. So I'll just go straight to my question. So considering the push for the SDG-aligned built environments, so how can dispute resolution mechanisms be adapted, to better handle these conflicts arising from sustainability-related contractual obligations? I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Andrew, you're on mute.
Apologies. So thanks very much for the question. Yeah, I was looking forward to this one when I saw it come up. I mean, certainly disputes relating to sustainability clauses are rising. And often these disputes about subjective performance indicators or poorly defined terms. And these are examples that I've seen myself in my own work. And I think when we start to look at this area, what's really clear to me is that we need innovation in the way that we deal with disputes, and how that's connected to, let's say, two of the SDGs, SDG 16 on justice and the 13 on climate actions. So adaptations that I've seen, so specialist dispute boards or experts in environmental law or life cycle assessment, mediation procedures that focus on restorative justice, long-term project outcomes. Sometimes you see contractual escalation ladders for resolving green KPI disputes without stalling project delivery. So maybe just 3 examples from around the world. The FIDIC Green Book, if you cover FIDIC at all in your studies. So you can get expert determination on environmental targets. In the European Union, there are green procurement frameworks which promote third-party arbitration to resolve disputes relating to eco-labeling of products. And in Singapore, you've got the Singapore Arbitration Centre that maintains like an expert law panel on environmental matters. But I guess also thinking about this a bit more widely and a bit more broadly, it's all about the contract. So clear contractual drafting, I think, is important. So, for example, what does net zero ready mean? Or what is biodiversity net gain? What does it mean? So incorporating precise terminology in a contract is really important around these areas. So I think this is all essential to avoid future ambiguity and enable enforceability. So that's the linkage, I think, with the contractual area. So I don't know if Giovanni has any input into this, but over to you.
Giovanni, do you want to add something to that?
No, none of the dispute resolution, but I believe Oluwaseun may have another question, maybe more relevant.
Okay.
Yeah, Olu, you want to go ahead and ask your second question? I think this might be the right time to do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, that actually, because your presentation actually delved a bit into, giving me an idea and actually answering a huge part of that question.
Okay.
And also your follow-up also really is an eye-opener. Talking about clear contractual drafts. That's concise. Thank you so
Okay.
much. And so my second question is actually quite broader and cuts across all. It is, what legal or procurement reforms do you believe are most urgently needed, to embed sustainability accountability across all stages of public-private partnership projects?
Giovanni, I'll let you take this one and
Yes.
I'll jump in.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes. So, and that's kind of tie in well with the introduction on the contractual obligation. So I would say that I will start with one of the findings from the most recent project I work on for the Transportation Research Board on implementing sustainable construction practices for roadway construction. A clear common theme that came across from that study where many different local and state transportation agency participated was that to achieve sustainable goal, there is a need to have clear expectation set since the procurement phase. So when we talk about procurement phases and how the client, public or not, select, in this case, public client for roadway in the United States, select the entity that will help them to deliver the project, setting up clear expectation during the procurement phase so that all the different proposals will be evaluated against those expectation is the starting point. This baseline will be used later to measure performance throughout the delivery of the project. So, and normally it's done during the procurement document and later in the contractual document. So that's why it's important to do that. So going back more on the general question on what legal and procurement reform are needed, is that depending on where we operate in the built environment, we know that the jurisdiction will affect significantly the procurement system, the contractual system across the globe. So what I notice through my study in the United States, but also interaction worldwide with colleagues or practitioners in the area, is that sometimes there is not enough freedom to shape the procurement system, the risk allocation, and so on, to really support the project team to achieve the project goal, and if sustainability goals are part of the project goal, also to achieve those goals. So the main, if I had to say what kind of reform are more urgently needed, it's really more understanding on how procurement system, contractual system can be used to achieve goal, including SDGs. If the client consider or incorporate SDG, some SDG specifically in their own project. At the country level, or at the state level in the United States, where, for instance, when we talk about specific type of project is more managed at state level versus federal level, there is a need of formalize the goal into more clear to convey project goal for specific project. Because again, the sustainable SDG are very high level, but in many cases, trying to incorporate something very high level, very vague, is counterproductive. And that was one of the findings from that CIB project, is where in many cases, the answer was pretty clear. Do not use vague goal. Be specific in what you want. Ask firms that are participating in the procurement to be as specific to respond how they will deliver to those goals. So The problem is that how you go from high level to specific level, there is a need for interpretation and contextualization, and that's maybe it need to be done by the client or by the agency if we talk about public agency. So, Andrew.
I'll just maybe expand on that and maybe go a little bit deeper. Yeah, looking at the question and kind of the area, what came to mind, and this is some of the work I've been involved in the past, and some kind of very recent kind of reading, is around benchmarking or KPIs that are enforceable on projects. And secondly, I think it's about transparency and openness. So, so let's talk about maybe some reforms that could take place to leverage the reform. So maybe performance-based contracts, maybe with enforceable KPIs related to carbon, maybe social value, resilience, this kind of measure. And some countries have started to adopt that approach. I think Canada has quite a good system around this area. It's transparency guidelines. Also in Scotland, they have like a similar approach in their through the non-profit distributing of social value from project undertaken. So transparency updates or mandates are also important. So open data on PPP performance, I think, is important, but also compliance. And this being monitored by somebody independent. So I think we need some independent monitors to ensure that we're delivering SDG value delivery across all phases of the project. So those are maybe like the three I would recommend for the industry to go forward. And we're starting to see some of that in different parts of the world.
So, Andrew, let me, Giovanni, let me build upon that question a little bit further. Now, like we've seen in the US, unless the owner pushes for certain requirements, whether they be SDG compliance, sustainability, or innovative technology, or whatever that might be, contractors are a bit shy in jumping into and adapting some of these latest techniques and the Sustainable Development Goals. And rightly so, because of the legal structure that sort of prevents them, because there's no profit implication or a risk-sharing implication. So that sort of keeps them away from, jumping into it. What has been your observation, and how can contractors adopt the requirements and then also adapt to the changing environment?
Well,
Go ahead,
Mark,
Giovanni.
yes, Mark. As you mentioned, contractors, they are firm that operate for profit, and when they engage, they operate in a project-based industry. So when they engage on project, they achieve the sustainability with a higher stress on the economic sustainability over any other level, all the other type of sustainability. When we look at how there is some kind of sharing mechanism, so that there is some kind of incentive to achieve goals that do not tie directly with the bottom line from a contractor standpoint. There are emergent procurement contracting system that help to achieve that. I would say most probably the building sector is much more advanced at that regard. I'm referring to IPD, integrated project delivery, and also some of the more advanced variation of design build. I'm specifically referring to progressive design build or integrated design build, which is almost, as I call it, is IPD in disguise, because it technically create KPI as and select it and align distribution of reward based on the achievement of those KPI. So that's allowed to the client to set those KPI in the procurement phase, select the firm that better align, or they most of the time through base value procurement, better align to the achievement of those KPI, and then later keep them accountable, because there is a risk sharing, but also there is a situation where there can be also a profit losing situation in the way the IPD or the risk sharing mechanism are set up into the project. And surprisingly, when we look at PPP, which again is overlaps significantly with procurement system, most of, if not all, the PPP, the one successful, tend to align with the most innovative type of procurement system, because when there is a private party investing financial resources on a project, that they have more flexibility in the way they set up, and they try to pull out from the toolbox the most advanced tool procurement system, so that the KPI can be achieved.
Yeah, and just to jump in very quickly on this, one example I saw was in Chile. I don't know if you can confirm this, Giovanni. So in Chile, their PPP program, I think there's a bonus payment system for exceeding sustainability targets, and I think some countries are starting to adopt that approach as well. So there's a financial incentive for exceeding targets under a PPP contractual arrangement.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, both of you raised very good points there, that unless the owner is going to require it and tie it to the KPIs or product performance, or there are some incentives that are being provided, it is difficult for a contractor to justify. I believe that in the present contractual arrangement, where that puts an additional burden to be satisfying or looking at SDGs, if that is going to cost them a little bit more or put more risk on their plate. So I think thinking about those innovative solutions as an incentive or tying it to KPIs, and these are the solutions, you're right, that might push that needle further. So let me move on, and there are a lot of questions coming in. So let me move on to our second question, which is Ala Hashem.
Yes.
Please go ahead and ask your question.
First of all, thank you all for your presentations. My question is, what are some real-world examples where procurement systems successfully promoted long-term environmental outcomes?
Giovanni, do you want to take this one, and I'll jump in after you?
Do you mind, Ala, to repeat it? I lost the connection for a second. I may not have captured the question.
Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah, please.
So I was asking about some real-world examples where procurement systems have successfully promoted the long-term environmental outcomes.
Well, I would say, yeah, I can provide some example. When we talk about innovation, sometimes a lot of the published work and research are really focused at the prime contracting level. So at the contractual framework between the client and the first tier of contractor, or the general contractor in the United States. But I would say that for the building sector, there is a lot of innovation that is happening independently from this first layer of contractual framework, which is more at the subcontracting level. And in the building sector specifically, a lot of the work is being done by specialty contractor on building, especially in the mechanical, electrical, plumbing scopes of work. So what is happening is that there are examples, specifically here in Seattle, there is a lot of attention towards sustainability by client, being a much more progressive urban environment compared with many other in the United States. And there is a push towards sustainability that sometimes is not taken up from the general contractor, but is taken up by the specialty contractor. Some of the major mechanical plumbing contractors, they don't only provide, as a subcontractor the contract, but then they take on the operation of the system on energy contracts, where there are specific goal in terms of performance, in many cases sustainability-driven performance of this system on building, and as a result, they continue the relationship with the client, with the owner directly, not anymore with the general contractor as a mediator during the construction phase. Does it answer your question?
Yes, it answers. Thank you. Thank you so much for your response.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Andrew.
To add to that, just looking up some research that's been done around this area, looking for examples. Probably the first kind of local example for me is the UK government construction playbook that was published in 2022, and that mandates early supplier engagement and life cycle costing for central government works. So that's one example that's very local, very relevant to me. Other ones that I've heard of is in Bogota, in Colombia, the rapid bus transit system. They put some life cycle emission targets in the contract to reduce the long-term urban pollution that arose from the redeveloped bus system. So that's two examples that I'm aware of, that I've seen working. So certainly these are successful ones, and it's worth, if you have time, audience, having a look at some of the work that's done around these two case studies on procurement, especially on PPP.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for that question, Alan. And let's take another question here. There's a good question from Yeji. Yeji, go ahead and ask your question, please.
Oh, yes, Professor. First, thank you so much for great presentation. And I had two questions, but I think I got an answer from the previous question. So I wanted to ask the question in my mind. So the current U.S. administration had a different opinion on the SDG direction so far. So there could be some confusion on the ongoing project. So in this kind of situation, what would be the effect of those decisions, or how can we deal with that in aspect of law framework?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So are you asking, just to clarify, to make sure I give you some sort of considered answer, if there was a change during a project with respect to a contractual matter or an interpretation of something? Is that what you're asking about?
So this question will be applied to the U.S. Project, U.S. construction project. So if the government make the big changes to the SDG goals.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
will be the different direction from the UN. So
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
then the ongoing project, of course, will follow the previous
Yeah.
contract, but there can there be any changes based on the current administrations?
So for I'm not an expert on the US context, so forgive me for that. Maybe others can jump in and clarify things. So the SDGs are simply goals, they're aims. Unless we go to the next stage, which is making them enforceable contractually, there's no way to achieve them. In essence, that's what I would say in the most broadest sense of trying to answer your question. So politics dictates a lot of things, and like the current environment, we're going through some change. Maybe some countries are starting to move away from the sustainability development agenda, and that's for each individual country to respond to. But essentially, if they're the lead can be taken by the industry itself, unless there's specific requirements that says for government funded projects or government supported projects, these are expectations under sustainability, and these differ from the goals expected under SDGs. Then the parties have to follow the government approach. Then I guess hopefully that starts to answer your question. Maybe not completely, but gives you an idea about these are aims and goals. They can't be delivered unless they're written into a contract, into a legal document, and that's the essence of them. Giovanna, I don't know if you had anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I concur with what you say. Again, the SDG are, as I mentioned before, a very high up in the sky goal that are more aspirational goal set by the United Nations. Obviously, when we talk about project, that's where it comes to the client to convey this high-level goal into specific project goal. Once a contract framework is in place, once there are parties who have signed on a contract, and in this contract there are clear expectations which may align with some of the SDG, it's up to the party to deliver, except there are some mechanism to make a change, because in many contracts there are clauses that allow to make changes. Now, since you mentioned United States there is another complexity which comes to the level of jurisdiction. You mentioning changing policy or alignment with the aspirational goal at the federal level, but again, a lot of the projects, built environment projects, are not done at the federal level, and many of the projects they are not done even with the federal funding at all. So there are projects that are done at state level, projects that are done at county level, at city level. Those local jurisdiction, they have their own stream of funds, mostly coming from property taxes or through proposition system, wherein the state is allowed to do a proposition system where people in the county or in the city decide to overtax themselves for 10 years to pay for a project. And once a contract is in place, it's just about delivering the contract. So it's true that there may be a general direction, change in opinion, maybe maintaining some SDG and de-emphasize other SDG. As Andrew mentioned, politics mean that people are entitled to have different opinion at the end of the day, and depending on which the governing party may lead one or the other. But at the end of the day, it does not affect a contract if the contract is in place, except if there are some funding stream that where one of the entities are funding the project may play a little bit more hardball to push the direction in one direction versus the other. I mean, that can happen. It's not just United States. It happens all the time everywhere else in the world as well.
Good question, Yeji. And just to add to that, from not only from a US context, but earlier we were talking about SDGs as a principle and how can construction companies reorient themselves to be able to contribute towards that. And if policies change, then they have to sort of revert course or sort of readapt or rename or whatever the term might be. And that is what I think you will have to see or you will see happening if there are change in policies. Owner can always remove a certain requirement from a contract and pay for what has been done. So, there are ways of managing that, but clearly if construction companies reorient themselves to address SDGs because the owners are requiring it, then that would be a reversal in course.
And Mark, I think, looking at the SDG, I believe maybe G is referring more specific about one, because one is the one that maybe the current administration has taken more stronger position on, which is number 13, climate action. So I guess that is the one that may have changed. But on the other hand, I'm not seeing a lot of real implementation on that in built environment because there are very few projects that have been able to figuring out how to carry on that through a construction project. So at the end of the day, there may be no impact by changing policy because the construction sector has been slow in implementing it anyhow.
Any other comments on that? Okay, great. Yeah, thank you, Eddie. Good question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, let me see if other questions. So let me take one more question here. We have plenty of time, so we'll have a lot of time to take questions. And let me ask Jake. Jake, you had a good question at the local level. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you guys for your time today. As far as my question goes, it was how can legal framework support sustainability in smaller scale or local construction projects that don't really involve big public-private partnerships?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of thought about that and wondered, yeah, this is often missed in a lot of the research and literature. I think with smaller projects, there's always going to be some sort of capacity constraint. Sometimes the ability to take these kind of high level goals and then apply them on a project by project basis. I think that's always going to be a challenge when it comes to these types of situation. I think we're talking about, let's say, SDG-11, the Sustainable Cities one, and this maybe reorientates my answer around building projects, urban environments, and also what's already been mentioned just now by Giovanni, SDG-13, climate actions. I think there may be some local level, if we're talking about a local level, let's say some sort of planning ordinance around green roofs or permeable pavements or biodiversity net gain. And then the kind of latter one I see applied on small scale projects in England, south of the border from Scotland. Building codes, we have building codes. All projects have to meet building code requirements. So energy efficient standards, maybe we have minimum standards there. Maybe have model contracts for embedding green KPIs, but orientated to small and medium-sized projects. So that maybe gives you 3 examples of how this might be geared towards small-scale construction projects. Does that give you an insight into how it might be adapted?
Yes, thank you.
Giovanni, anything to add?
Yes. So I would say, as a disclaimer, Jake say no public-private partnership, no big project. Let's talk about smaller, let's talk more smaller scale project. Procurement system is very important. Obviously, if the agency or the client or the private client is selecting the contractor still based on price on a low bid environment, that's not going to happen. Nothing is going to happen from a sustainability standpoint, because everything will be tied up on price and profit at the end of the day. So, however, going back again on the client, whatever it is a private client or is a smaller agency, maybe it's the school district is building a new school or is renovating a historical building to make it more modern for their school needs. Incorporating those into the procurement system as the KPI during the selection, and using a procurement system that allow to choose no only on price, and I'm referring more specifically United States to best value selection, would allow to set up in the procurement phase the KPI, select the best team, possibly an integrated team where designer and contractor are together since the start. And then ideally, especially for building, even bring in some of the major specialty contractors, such as the MEP contractor, because they are so important for achieving sustainability on building projects. So, and that's when before I mentioned IPD and progressive design build, those are the two procurement systems that in the United States I see the most promising, that have been able to do that. That's why they're becoming almost prevalent here in the Northwest, where there is a lot of attention on sustainability. And it really allows to custom fit the procurement system to the need for goal by the client, and to incorporate specific goal that may not be straightforward for a contractor to implement.
And Jake, if you want, are you looking for examples of contracts that deal with these issues? So you might have heard of the new engineering contract, NEC 4 in particular, the short form version of NEC 4, which is for smaller projects. They've got green clause. You can add options into these contracts. All of the NEC contracts allow you to select option clauses, and many of the option clauses are available for NEC 4 relate to sustainability and the green agenda, including most of the SDGs. So small projects can incorporate sustainability KPIs or aspirations or aims, but using NEC short form contracts. And that's some experience that I've got as well.
Thank you, Jake, for that very good question. We have a couple of more questions that have come in. So let's start with Hewan, and then we'll go to Chandra next. Hewan, go ahead, please.
Yes, hi, both professors.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for the awesome presentation. This is the topic I was personally interested to hear about. While listening both of you speaking, I was curious, in your viewpoint, how might different approaches to the liability and the risk allocation in construction contracts, especially in global project involving multiple parties from diverse legal and regulation backgrounds, impact the ability to this project to meet specific SDGs? Like, could you share any examples, like good examples or bad examples, please? Thank you.
Giovanni, do you want to start, and I'll jump in?
Well, go jump in. I'm still thinking. I don't have any example on the top of
it's an interesting question. I think from like a legal or contractual standpoint, there has to be a contract. So what are the parties contracting to? If it's a multinational, multi-country type project, maybe a mega project somewhere, could be the FIDIC type contract. So FIDIC, have you heard of, I take it you've heard of FIDIC contracts and how they're used internationally. So yeah, have a look at FIDIC contracts. That I would say that's one of the main type of contract that's used on a kind of multi-party, multi-client, multi-contractor international basis. So yeah, I think contract is driven by the law. So depending on the jurisdiction, you know, which jurisdiction applies. So parties have to agree the jurisdiction first. And this is really important when it comes to how to deal with disputes, because the jurisdiction sets the scene for how the dispute may be resolved in the future. Probably the best example, I can't pin down exactly one project that in particular, but I would say that there's been a particular type of trend that I've seen with these types of projects, especially from the legal contractual point of view. So parties tend to like contracts they're familiar with and contracts that allow options. So parties to introduce options into the contracts. So optional clauses. So they're starting to develop over time. And the one I just mentioned, the NEC, New Engineering Contract, is a great example of that, where you can have that multinational setup. And it's left there for parties to agree the jurisdiction, which law applies to the contract. And in those, you can mandate that you have a dispute avoidance board. So that's an independent board that's set up by the parties to resolve any disputes as they arise. So that might be maybe part way to answering your questions, but certainly seen how there's been a growth of the NEC contracts over time and certainly starting to be used beyond the traditional common law countries and now getting into the civil law countries as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of time, Giovanni, to jump in with your thoughts.
Thank you, Andrew. I think, you know, since we were asked about the example of how this viability can play out for complex projects, I would suggest simply a case-specific project case study. It's not a good one, and that's why it's still ongoing, the investigation of the legal ability of. I don't know, many of you were aware of that major bridge failure in Italy, in Genoa, the Morandi Bridge, so-called. Morandi was the designer of this bridge. That failed, and that project technically was, I would say, a BOT, build, operate, transfer, but technically without transfer because it was retained by the private operator by renewing the contract for operation continuously. And there is still a lot of legal repercussion on that project, but certainly the project failed to the project was delivered before the SDG were formulated, but certainly failed to deliver as a project, and later he failed to deliver during the operation phase on at least number 9, build resilient infrastructure. So, and I would say in that case, a little bit has to do with the excessive innovation in the way control was set in place, where technically there was the control portion of the operation became weaker and weaker, so that at the end of the day, the public side strongly aligned their position with the private side, which was highly driven by the fact that they were a public company and that they were looking more about stocks value than other decision. But again, I would suggest to review that one. I don't think there is an answer, a solution, because until you don't have a problem, you don't know what kind of repercussion. But in that specific project is interesting on how a PPP evolved in the wrong direction, in my view. and failing, even if no construction phase, but failing later in the operation and in the control phase of the operation to achieve at least the resilient infrastructure portion of the SDG-9.
Yeah, if I was going to give you an example, I don't have a project example, but just going back to my contract document exam thing I mentioned, if you look at the FIDIC Gold Book, gold as in the gold, you can have sustainability linked guarantees and performance bonds in that contract, and that's a way to address liabilities and risk sharing and so on. So have a look at that. It's worth having a look to see how the provisions work.
Okay, thank you too for answering the question. FIDIC is FIDIC, is it?
FIDIC.
Okay, thank you so much. I will look it up.
It's a French acronym. I can't remember Mark, you might know the acronym meaning.
No, I don't remember either, but yeah, that's the contract used in much of Europe and parts of Asia.
That's
not
right.
in the US, unfortunately.
It's can Middle East, Southeast Asia,
And
it's
Middle
very
East as well,
common. Yeah.
Yeah. But, talking from a global perspective, and I think that was part of your question as well, Hayvon, that, the risks are at the macro level, the market level, and also at the project level. And navigating that in a multi-party environment gets to be very difficult because contractor might bid on the job based on whatever the condition existed at that time in response to SDGs. But if there's a change in regime or there's a change in policies, then the market level risk, the country level risk actually goes in a very different direction.
Yeah, and I think we saw that. Yeah, sorry to jump in, Mark, but
No, go
I
ahead,
think we
please.
saw that with like COVID pandemic. We saw this play out, literally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, good question, and that's actually a full debate in itself. So thank you for asking that question. Let's move on to Chandra. Chandra, you had some good questions coming up. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Professor. Thank you. So I have 3 questions for the panelists. Question 1 would be, should international financial institutions like World Bank or IMF tie funding to the legal commitment towards this sustainable construction and large-scale constructions?
Okay.
I couldn't hear it.
The question is in the comments. Nobody can see it because we have locked it. So
do you want me to repeat the question?
Chandra, go ahead and read it again, please.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. So the question is, should international financial institutions like World Bank or IMF tie funding to the legal commitments towards sustainable construction and large-scale constructions?
To the mandate.
Okay, yes, I now understood it. Okay, I've been involved with 2 international agencies. One was the World Bank. And I was in a team that provided technical assistance for municipality in 2 different projects. No, 3 actually, or 2 in Uganda in different year and 1 in Turkey. I do not recall. I mean, the way it was set up there is that it was, I remember this specific program of technical assistance, which was aligned with some of the SDG, was about incorporating climate smart decision-making at the onset of the project planning. So they were actually planner in the team. I was more the construction person that worked with municipal engineers and so on to help them coming out with some reasonably accurate. Obviously, when you have less than 1% design done, is always a wild guess. Cost of the project. In that case, the World Bank require the municipality to buy into this process And they were receiving technical assistance, they were receiving training, they were receiving assistance on site. So I travel. I went twice in Uganda, and the second time I spent 3 weeks driving or crisscrossing all the country to visit. And because they have to buy into this process, then they were able to develop prioritization of those project needs at the municipality level, and they could link those projects, especially the top-ranked one, with some kind of support, financial support system from the World Bank. So the first time I was in Kampala, and the second time 2 years later I went to Uganda, for instance, and I recall a lot of the project that we discussed 2 years before, at least the easier one, the one that didn't need significant work to be done on the design phase, this, most sanitation and so on, they were already under construction. And I remember, while we were driving, I was recognized project that I worked with the municipal engineer during the planning phase 2 years before. I don't know what's happened later. Again, going back on changing policy, the second trip I did there was around the same time where the relationship, because of election system and so on, were getting a little bit more sour, and the World Bank was trying to enforce certain goal more than the human right. And so I don't know if actually the second phase of project that I participated in the planning phase was never funded at the time, because in a certain way, I was really at the technical assistance level. I was not in the decision-making level involved, but the decision-making was a way to try to align the decision-making around the project, around this broader goal that the World Bank was achieving, which are not exactly the SDG goal, but in many cases they align with that. I mean, that's my first-hand experience with the World
Bank. I don't have any first-hand experience like Giovanni, but probably circling back to some of the early comments I made about implementation or meeting SDG goals. We need the law to help us implement the aims of the UN agenda. But the law has to be contextual, inclusive, and adapted for evolving standards. So my answer would be yes, but it needs to be contextual and inclusive. So many, especially developing countries, face capacity problems, trying to deliver a project against a set of contractual goals that are linked to SDGs. So we have to face that. Sometimes the market there is informal in every sense, but also there may be problems with access to justice. And this maybe limits the aspirations, even those written into the contract, as they align to each of the different SDGs. So SDG 10 on reducing inequalities may be impacted, maybe SDG 11 or sustainable cities, maybe, and certainly in a lot of countries, it's the access to justice one, or SDG 16. So what I'm aware of is simplifying procedures, I think, should be integral to this funding within a contractual sense. And that minimizes the constraints or barriers that small enterprises may have in trying to introduce innovations or meeting contractual requirements. So there are examples of small scale or stripped back contractual templates specifically written for SME parties that's small to medium enterprises. But also a degree of decentralization, I think, is important. So having decentralization around the enforcement mechanisms that may be linked to some contractual KPIs or benchmarks that are written in by the World Bank funders. Maybe having a community dispute board there may help in that kind of sort of process. So certainly the answer from me is yes, but make it contextual.
Yeah, thank you both for answering Chandra's question. Chandra, thanks for that question. Let's hold off your other questions for now. We have time for one more question, and I'm going to go to Jim. Jim, you had a good question. Go ahead and ask, please, and then we will have our last round of questions.
My one question I had was centered around PPPs. Excuse me. They seem to be falling out of favor in the United States. I was kind of curious how you see them operating in the rest of the world.
Do you want to take that first?
Yeah. So Jim, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Yeah, Jim. So I wouldn't say that in the United States is losing ground. I would say that most probably in the United States has never taken the ground that took in other countries, at least for the last century. It just in the United States, the procurement system was so tied up on low bidding for such a long time for the public sector that make almost impossible to use public-private partnership. Now, when we look about other countries, again, I'm originally from Italy. The whole main highway system is all public-private partnership, including the Morandi Bridge that I mentioned before, that was part of that system. Even if they have different operator. The railroad system was public, later was modified so that the network stay on a public-owned agency, but then the distribution, like there are different companies that use the same network to run their own train, high-speed train. In South America, I would say probably is the most advanced use in recent year. Andrew mentioned before Chile for how they implemented for SDG as well. I travel often for families to Peru. The main highway system is all public-private partnership there as well. So if we look at public-private partnership, they have been implemented across the world. The thing is that in place like Italy, post-World War II, where there was no, differently from other countries where there were major roadway infrastructure, in Italy there was no major roadway infrastructure in place. The highway system was implemented through public-private partnership. In places like United States, the interstate system was mainly a public system. So the same system that you have in Italy, there was toll road, public-private partnership, where technically the toll were going to pay, was developed through infrastructure investment in the United States. And later on, in the United States, the infrastructure had been, public-private partnership infrastructure had been implemented, but sometimes there's no even need for a private component because the public went straight into the toll. So for instance, Texas, where I did my graduate study, I studied the Central Texas Turnpike system. That one is owned by TxDOT, and only the toll system, the technology of the toll system was managed by a private company, but really was mostly public money, public operation, public decision-making who are the contractor, public involvement in setting up the contractual framework for delivering all the roads in that turnpike system. Now, when you go in a country where there is no a strong component of public funding, then the only possibility you may have is bringing in private. So Italy, post-World War II, was in that situation. South America, in many cases, in that situation. There are also some specific sectors where public-private partnership have found a nice niche, like healthcare. United States, healthcare is all private, mostly. Hospitals are private. In Italy, it was mostly public. But once the population grow, the need of technology, revamping, and so on grow, around by 2000, 2005, almost every new project for hospital ended up to be in public-private partnership, just because there was when hospital projects were trying to be delivered by the public side, they were always significantly late. I mean, we talk about 10, 15 years delay in delivery of the hospital. And so that was push. It was mostly scheduled delivery and getting the infrastructure in place, the infrastructure in place when needed was drove going into the direction. And for instance, at the time, the second largest contractor in Italy, Astaldi, they make a business decision to really go away from being just a contractor and to be a hospital operator as well. And by 2007, 40% of the revenue was coming from the hospital operation branch. So really, the public-private partnership, it depends on the history of the contractual framework and also on the robustness of the decision-making and funding from the public side. When there is no robustness in funding, or when the contractual side does not provide flexibility to the point to deliver on time, on cost, independent from SDG, that's when PPP does not occur. And that's how that's when the PPP actually occur more, because sometimes it bypass the traditional public process and allow to shorten the delivery time and to keep more control when control is still exercised by the public side. Again, the Morandi Bridge is an example of how to do it wrong. Jim, hopefully I answered your question. So.
Thank you.
Jim, I might have some insight, and not too much more than Giovanni's, but my instinct maybe is that if PPP is on the wane in US, that's almost bucking the trend, because we're going through like a revitalization of PPP across the world. So India, Canada, Chile, Nigeria, they have many PPP projects now that specifically address in different ways SDGs. So that's one probably first comment I would make. The other might be that maybe the problematic nature of PPP in US is related to either legal complexity or the politics, maybe political resistance around projects, maybe in certain states, I don't know, but also maybe some failures that are now in the public mind form part of the political discourse. So that might be factors that are leading into a perception that maybe PPP is not the right delivery mechanism in US more generally. But that's just my instinct.
And
thank you both. Sorry, go ahead, Giovanni.
Yeah, and just to give some example of what Sandro mentioned, how sometimes the politics and the local preference affect, I would like to refer to the very quick turnaround of one state, Texas, where I was, where around 2004, there was the first legislation statewide that allowed to use design build technically, which a few years later, maybe 2 or 3 years later, was revised to provide much more opening to use almost everything, including PPP. And then when when I was there, the first project that was used with this new policy framework was called EDA, the name of their framework, but technically it allowed design build maintain and design build operate. So the Central Texas Turnpike, which I studied extensively, was really focused on that framework. Then later, the governor of the state, Rick Perry at the time, really pushed to go beyond that because he had a very bold infrastructural blueprint, the Inter-Texas Corridor system. And the only way to achieve it was to leverage on funding from the private side. So he was able to get through a revision to the legislation and to the policy to allow what was called CDA, Comprehensive Development Agreement, which technically were allow PPP in a broader format. Now, what's happened there is that they did award the first two sections of the Trans-Texas Corridor. I believe it was one San Antonio, Houston, and the second one, I can't remember. The second one was supposed to be Dallas, Houston. But what's happened is that the first project were awarded to non-US based, non-Texas based company. And part of it, and they were both major PPP operator from Spain, Sintra, and I can't remember the name of the other one. Because again, Spain went through a significant revamp of the infrastructure system, road system, where he ended up that some company really became very sophisticated in operating, but also going after this type of agreement, and that created a backlash. And so the backlash was that technically within few years, Texas plays a moratorium and they buy out from these two contracts. So sometime, independently from the contract, if he can deliver the project, if he can leverage private funding, sometimes there are other things that affect decision making. In that case, it was the backlash that there was the perception that no Texas contractor was gonna be able to build any of this road because the operator, the lead operator were from Spain, and the contractor that were working under them, they were from other parts of the United States, either the West Coast or the East Coast. So.
Great. And Jim, thank you very much for that question, and thank you both of you for providing that answer. In the interest of time, I'm going to forego my last question for the very first time. But Jim, you got the last question in this case. But let's thank our panelists. This has been a fantastic discussion. There are many other questions that have come in that we didn't even get to touch. So indeed, a very, very positive discussion and a lot more to talk about. So thank you both for putting in those seed thoughts and for providing your opinion and your thoughts on a lot of questions that have come up. And hopefully this discussion will continue, of course, during the World Building Congress and well beyond after that. So let's give our panelists a big round of applause, please. I know you cannot open your mics, but on your behalf, everybody's behalf, I want to thank both of you for taking your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. And please get in touch if you have more questions.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.